So the recording is ongoing. So just for your information, the meeting is recorded. So welcome everyone on this year's first MetaCube team meetup. We welcome everyone from the community, regular contributors, and also those who are just interested in the topics but not regularly contribute. This year's and before I forget to mention, my name is Adam Rosman, and usually I am the one who is facilitating the community meetings. Also, I'm one of the maintainers, and you can see me on that room camera screen. I was the one waving, and then with me there are a few folks here who are also the maintainer, part of the maintainer group. I don't think we have to do like individual introductions because there are quite a lot of us, and many of you already know each other. So let's just focus on the agenda points, I would say. And then this year is a little bit different compared to previous years because during the last 1.5 year, quite a lot of topics have accumulated that require consensus within the community, and each of them affect the architecture of the whole MetaQ stack, and we need to sort them out in order to have a stack that's able to support multi-tenancy and DHCP-less environments, because this seems to be a need across the whole community. And as I wrote in the email, if during the meeting you would have some other ideas, some other further proposals, feel free to add it to the document, and at the end of the meeting we can discuss if we would like to have a second one a few weeks later, a second meeting at in a similar time slot, but on another day. And yeah, maybe these are the general ideas related to the meeting. And I'm just trying. Oh yeah, and one thing that I wanted to ask. So, how do you feel if in the middle of the meeting we would have a break? Kashif, we discussed how long do you think we should have? 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, so if we would have a 15-minute break at the middle, would it be okay? I would ask it in a way that, is there anyone who is not okay with that? I will check the chat also. 1 second. Just checking the chat. It's a bit slow. Break, plus. Okay, so everyone seems to be fine with the break. Okay, great. And then let's just quickly check the actual, when would the break be? So now it's 11 here. Okay, so 1.5 hour from this point on, we will have a break. Okay. Okay. So I think without further ado, we can start with the first topic. And what I would like to ask is those who have participated anyways in the discussion, I would really like to ask you, because you are the most invested and the most knowledgeable about these topics. And the first one is the CAPI multi-tenancy contract proposal for CAP-M3. And I would like you to please drive this discussion. And then I would also encourage everybody else that feel free to raise your hand. And I think there is a hand raising feature here also. I have to check. I know it's there on Teams. But you react. Yeah, there is a react. So, but even better if you write it to the chat. I would say it's better if you write it to the chat that you have a question. and then I will monitor the chat, and that way we won't lose anyone's reaction. Okay, so and then I would start this. Leonard, would you be okay to present this as this was your proposal, and then that would be nice to hear this one from you first, your point of view.
Sure, definitely. So in Cluster API, there is a certain definition for what multi-tenancy is. So they have defined what multi-tenancy means in a Cluster API perspective. And essentially, it means that there is some way for the user to give credentials like for each cluster that you create, basically. So what the larger cloud providers have done is that they have a reference to some form of credentials, basically on the infrastructure cluster object. And they can also have that on the machine template and possibly in other places. So you could theoretically at least have separate credentials like for each machine deployment, for example, if they go into different zones or something like that. Um, what exactly those credentials look like differ between the providers. Um, I have seen now that many go in a direction where they have a separate custom resource actually for this, and that makes it a bit more flexible than just having some kind of secret or something locally. So that is something we can consider also. Yeah, but the idea is that each user is responsible for providing the credentials instead of uh, giving the infrastructure controller itself um, this like these credentials. So then you can have multiple users and each have their own credentials that they give to the controller, and that the controller then in turn uses to access the resources. In our case, that would be access to the bare metal hosts. So instead of of having a service account and role-based access control for CapM3 so that CapM3 can always access all the bare metal hosts in the same cluster. The idea would then to allow the user to specify, hey, here are the credentials. That would be some kind of kube config or token that the controller can then use to access that user's bare metal hosts. And they could be locally there in the same cluster, or they could be remotely in some other cluster. Then what else should I say? I think the latest comment was we were discussing about like propagating status from the bare metal host back to the metal cube machine. And I think we ended up now in this that since it's for really for the next topic then of changing the bare metal host API and decomposing it. So if we are going to do that, and I guess we are, it would be problematic that we now first start propagating status back and then we start changing things. So I think we are leaning towards there that we would not propagate anything. Everything stays exactly as it is. Metal Cube machine has no more status about the bare metal host than what it has today, and the user would just have to go to the bare metal host to see for themselves. And then when we change the bare metal host, then we can think about, is there something we should propagate back to the Metal Cube machine also? Uh, yeah. Was there something else that I missed here? I should probably say a bit something about the benefits here. So since copy has this contract already defined, there will be users that expect to have this implemented. So there is a benefit in having it in that way. It provides multi-tenancy on that level, so different users can have access to separate bare metal host pools. It does not give really a good solution for sharing bare metal host resources, like you give the same credentials and then share, but we don't have a good solution for that today either. That would be the decomposing the API then to sort of split up the roles between who can do what. It would also help in the CAPM3 E2E tests because one issue we have today is that when we in a test in a CAPM3 E2E test, we create clusters and we do operations on them. The expectation then is that there are bare metal hosts in the same namespace, and the way CAPM3 cluster API has structured their end-to-end testing framework is that you create a new namespace for each test, and then you run the operations there. And if we need to have the bare metal host then in the same namespace, there is some extra complications because we either have to move them there or first create the namespace, then create the bare metal hosts, perhaps go through inspection even, and all those things. It would be much easier if we can just let the bare metal hosts be in one place, and then just from the test namespace, we just reference that, hey, use this pool of bare metal hosts for this test. That is similar to how the other providers would do it. Yes, I think that hopefully summarizes it quite well.
Yes, thank you, Leonard. I think then the next, you quite nicely summarized this, and as far as I can tell, from the issue itself, there is only this one active or recent discussion related to the propagation, and there you seem to all lean in the direction that you would not propagate. That's the easiest solution. So, what what should the community help you with to start working on this? So what do you need? I would ask it in that way.
I think from my perspective, I should update the proposal with this. If we agree that we won't propagate, and that would be the easy way, then I should update the proposal to address that. And then if we can then merge it, I would be happy to start working on it. I think. I hope there wasn't anything I missed. I see some comments. Yes, outdated per discussion about. Yes, definitely, exactly. I should update the proposal based on that, and then hopefully it should be good. I see it sounds good to me in the chat. Excellent, thank you. I will try to get some time to update it in the following days.
Okay. What I was wondering is that do you foresee any potential conflict with the other one, the host claim resource? Because there was a lot of discussion and cross-referencing these two with each other. Do we have any conflict that you know?
I don't really think so, but if others have other ideas, please say so. I mean, both proposal will mean changes to CAPM3, right? But now we in this one we would, or in the first one that we like the topic we are on, that would mean changing how CAPM3 accesses the bare metal host, but the rest would stay the same. It's still a bare metal host. But in the decomposing, we would need to change probably more because then it would be different resources changing the API completely. But I don't see that um, it would break anything in that way. We still need to change the way we access or deal with that API if we change the API.
Okay. Is there anyone who has a question or any sort of objection, or partly or completely? I see one comment in the chat from Dimitri that I'd like to know that the host claim proposal has a lot of discussion and seems contentious, so we cannot really block this work on that one. Okay, that's reasonable. And Leonard, how do you feel if this would be implemented first, uh, then how much would that restrict the implementation of the host claim work? We will check that soon, just before we would continue. If you have any ideas about that.
Um, wait, you mean how would the multi-tenancy affect the host claim or?
Yeah. I mean, if the implementation of the copy multi, like if you would implement the copy multi-tenancy contract, what restrictions, if any, would it pose to the host claim? Or if not restrictions, like would it help the host claim implementation in any ways? Would it provide any sort of functionality that helps with the implementation? Like, what's the connection between the two? Maybe we should actually look first at the host claim and then discuss this, because we might need to discuss this after both has been presented. So let's put this aside. My question.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I think also the host claim proposal, like Dimitri said, there is a lot going on there, and parts of it we are not, well, I feel at least that the community was not that supportive of having some. There was something about like a REST API in between. I have not fully grasped why that would be needed. I think previously when I talked, I was thinking more about this. Um, what did we call it? Decomposing BMO API decoupling. It was more that one I was thinking of. And I think the host claim and this API decoupling, those are, I guess, alternatives. We cannot do both of them. We need to choose which
okay.
way to go.
Okay, let's do it in a way that we will go through those two also. So far, as I can see from the chat, there are still discussion going on, and there are still changes. So let's first, but as far as I know, this one broadly does not conflict with those, and this can be implemented in the way that it's proposed. There is no active opposition, and let's say that you come to a conclusion with the data propagation. So then let's go to the other two that are a bit more complicated. And then before we do that, I will just read the chat, because quite a lot is happening there. But maybe folks who wrote to the chat, you can actually also bring these up or voice these. So I would first ask that Pierre, would you be okay to talk about this proposal same way as Leonard did about his, and maybe reflect on the on that previous one, if you have any reflections.
Yes. Okay, so Claim is a way for me to share bare metal hosts between different clusters. So it's the second part of multi-tenancy is that not only you need to access bare metal hosts that are not in your local namespace, but you also need to do it in a way that you do not see the bare metal host used by the others, even if they can be given either to you or to the other cluster. So the idea is really making a kind of gate of where what you give in the host claim is what you need to propagate to the bare metal host. And in the same way, in the status, there you will get what the bare metal host allow you to see, but not more. So bare metal host credentials are completely hidden. For the way then you access the remote cluster, I think we now all agree that it should be with a kubeconfig. The REST API proposed in the original proposal was rather for avoiding manipulating kubeconfig and manipulating the airbag rules associated with it. Because I was afraid that for automation, if you need to add new users with new namespaces for their host claims, you would have to generate those airbag rules, and the controller who would do that work would be much too privileged to be accepted. So let's go back to the host claim content. It's sometimes I would rather like to call it a workload, because what you describe is just the OS image and initialization that you need, and it's well, you don't really need to use it with KPM3. It's a notion that could be used on bare metal hosts even without KPM3 for launching other kind of workload. And in the status, what we really need is everything that needs to be exposed to the templators, essentially.
Okay. Let me go there to the discussions, and let's see what are the pain points here. We might actually have to compare these two with Zane's informal proposal before we can discuss this in depth. Let's see what's still left here. looking for the last ones. I'm looking for the ones who have commented. Okay, so there is what one is the last one?
And
So long. Yeah, go on.
I can add so from an implementation point of view, because we have a proof of concept that is working, it's really splitting the code of the CAPM3 controller in two parts. It's really at the level of the bare metal 3 machine that you split the selection from the generation of metadata and user data, and selection is on the host claim side, and it can be done on a remote cluster, and it can be done close to the bare metal host, and you have the data templates and things like that that are still with a cluster. But the impact of the modification, even if it looks like big, in terms of new code, is really reduced.
Mhm. Okay. I'm still in the chat messages also. So have the by the way read Zane's proposal? Have any thoughts on that? How would that affect your work? Because then the folks now mention that this one might a bit more conflict with that rather than what Leonard was proposing. And it's good to hear that the REST API has been removed. But have you read Zane's work? Because if not,
Yes,
yeah, you read. Okay, okay.
I think that I don't remember the exact name, but there is one part that is close to the host claim. And it's clear that if we go that way, the host claim and should be either this notion or an equivalent. Then there are other parts. For me, I still, well, I'm not sure that from the cluster handler perspective, there is a need for that level of distinction of roles on the bare metal host. It could be interesting for people who manage bare metal hosts, but the level of contract and API at the level of distinction between cluster manager and infrastructure manager, I more or less think that it's completely captured by host claims.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What I will do is I will show that one. I see that Zane is not part of the meeting or has not joined yet. Uh, we will talk about Zane's proposal and then we will compare these two with each other. That will be the way because I think that's the more interesting. I would like to say that this one, your one, Spear, is an official proposal. The other one is not. So until that becomes an official proposal, uh, we cannot take that as seriously as this one because this was proposed to the Metal3 project. That one is just in a Google Doc. Let me check the messages, and there are quite a lot of questions coming from Dimitri related to this whole data propagation and the host claim, and comparing it with Zane's work. Dimitri, would you be willing to present Zane's work? Are you familiar with that enough?
I am unfortunately not very well familiar. I know the spirit of this work because Zane and I have talked about this, and this is partly reflected in my comments there. But also, I think Leonard has done a very good job creating a joint proposal. There was some, I believe, in discussions, and I believe it was Leonard, sorry if I'm mistaken, where I, the whole thing is summarized, and there's a diagram of all resources. Also taking account that Zane's proposal was written years ago, and well, the summary is relatively new, so maybe we should consider that essentially, especially thanks to the nice diagram.
Okay, where do you see that summary? I read the proposal, but where is that summary you mentioned?
It's in discussions, not in the Google
Oh,
Doc discussions, but in.
I will link it just a second.
okay.
Then while I have the mic, yeah, my questions will be very similar to what we discussed with Leonard's first proposal. We need to figure out how we propagate error messages without disclosing so much. And also in any conversation about multi-tenancy, something that is addressed in Zane's proposal and is not addressed here is how the user even knows what resources are available to them, right? Some sort of inventory question, where, okay, I have an empty namespace. I want to provision bare metal host. What can I do? What models do I have? How does it even look like? Like, how do I do that without going to my administrator and writing them email and asking, hey, do I have Dell machines available? How do I select them? How do I write selector if I don't know what bare metal hosts look like? I think that's a big missing part here.
Okay, so this might be even better than just looking one by one these proposals. So let's then look this page. And then this was the full proposed multi-tenant architecture. And this does exactly combines the things that we were talking about, and even the DHCP less a little bit. But then, okay, let's look this one. And how should we tackle this one? I show this picture. Would that be a good enough background for the discussion? Okay, so for those who are not familiar with Zane's work, I will just quickly summarize. I will jump back and then we can come back to this one. So that work, that original proposal was basically meant to cut up the existing BMH CR into smaller pieces, and those smaller pieces could have separate role-based access control associated with them, and it was basically providing a separate bare metal image, so a separate with separate RBAC and separate permissions. So another group or another group of users could just manage an image, attach and detach it, and then no other functionality would be available, and there would be a shutdown request same way. So there would be group or groups of users who could shut down or turn on the machine, but basically nothing else. Both of these would be separate CRs, and then there was an inventory and an allocation, and those played the role of basically providing the information that you have machines available, what machines are available, and then there would be a controller. So when you make a claim, then there would be an allocation, and then you would receive it. So I think, Pierre, you meant this part, this inventory and allocation. That's very similar to how the host claim.
No,
Yeah, go on.
Well, maybe the bare metal allocation. Bare metal in,
The allocation, okay. Yeah. I will go there and highlight the allocation.
I, well, what is not clear for me is how you, because the bare metal image, its content is more or less the spec of those claim. And now the question is how really you restrict well, what you want is that you need when you have been allocated, or you make that you're the only one to get to manage the bare metal image. It's a little something that I missed in the. In the way you solve the multi-tenancy.
Mhm.
I understand that you have different objects and different roles on the BMH itself, but how do you orchestrate in the same pool of BMH that at some point only one user sees the BMH it has been allocated to. And for this, you need some kind of mechanism of view, and that's what those claims propose. And if you have more than one object, probably you can replicate the view mechanism, but you will have to synchronize several objects instead of one. With Kubernetes RBAC as it is, I just do not see how you can do it differently.
Mhm. Okay, we have a raised hand from Dimitri.
Yeah, if I may, I think I'd like to take a step back and maybe set a bit more context here. If you could get back to the diagram, the shared screen, because I think a big problem here is in the naming. As well known, the second biggest problem in software engineering. Allocation is not a great name here, so let's not read into the names right now way too much because for example, the diagram actually describes allocation as a policy. What Zane is proposed is not a policy as too much. But let's again take a step back from specific proposal and see the landscape which we're operating. Right now, we have done a terrible thing because Ironic has done a terrible thing. We mixed together the inventory and provisioning request in one resource, simply because Ironic does the same thing, and it was terrible in Ironic, and it's terrible here. So the level 0 of what Zane was proposing, and I think we have to get there no matter which proposal we take, is we simply decompose the bare metal host object into what is, in a sense, inventory, like global admin level inventory, like which servers exist in my racks, and a provisioning request for this particular inventory item. Still talking about admin level access, no multi-tenancy yet, right? So level 0, not multi-tenant yet, but now we are looking at a situation where there is some shade of multi-tenancy, let's put it this way, because there are people who can edit bare metal host objects or create bare metal host objects. And these are people who own hardware. And there are people who can provision bare metal host objects, which may not be able to edit them. And this is the benefit of level 0 here is in terms of multi-tenancy, now we have people who can create and edit bare metal host objects. And now we have people who can only see them and create a provisioning request against them. Again, I'm using different terms on purpose here. I'm not saying allocation because it's very loaded. I can create a provisioning request and I can delete a provisioning request, and that will modify the bare metal host object in a way I can see because I can read that. But I no longer have power to, I don't know, change its BMC credentials or do other stuff that can potentially be damaging or, because I don't own this hardware. Excuse me. On the level 1, we are now talking about a different namespace, or potentially different cluster. I've used namespace for simplicity. And now level 1 is we're talking about multi-tenancy. And in level 1, I'm a user. I know bare metal hosts exist. Now, there is some sort of a policy that is telling that I can access some bare metal hosts. Leonard is calling allocation. I read Zane's proposal as allocation was a different thing. We can backchat about this a bit, but that again may talk about in general terms. So there's some sort of policy which defines that this user can use these bare metal hosts. It's critical that that exists because there may be different pools of hosts. It's critical that users are somehow aware of that because you don't want to operate in the darkness. And that circles back to my earlier comment in the chat. So as a user, I cannot see or edit bare metal host objects. I cannot interact with provisioning requests. They are created in the background probably for me. But I can see the inventory, which Leonard rightly put here, what BMHs are there. So these are sort of resources that expose to me the information. They're probably managed by some sort of controller. I probably don't edit them, but I see them and they tell me what source of bare metal hosts are available for me to provision on. That is critical part that I think is missing in host claims resources because we have been there in the Ironic community. We had a situation where we were used through the OpenStack compute service. And one of the biggest complaints were, okay, I can create instances, but I don't know what is backing them. Are there bare metal machines there? Can I use them? Is my request correct even? To use these concepts, I putting a host selector into my request. Is it going to match something? When it does not match, what went wrong? What can I fix? Is it just a typo? Did I run out of bare metal hosts that are allocated to me? What is going on, right? So this sort of exposure needs to be happening, and ideally not just through error messages, but also up in advance. So you could users could put in their UIs, right? Graphical user interfaces where you can see, okay, that's your inventory. You can provision that. And the final part of this picture is some sort of resource, which is, again, a provisioning request, but on the tenant level, right? So we talked about provisioning request on the admin level, and now there has to be, again, a corresponding resource here where I say, okay, I want to consume that. Leonard is calling it bare metal image. Now, this is level 1. Level 2 includes, okay, we can copy over hardware details so that people can have hardware details. Shutdown request, which Leonard is commenting, found that questionable. Also find it questionable for the same reason, seems clunky, but we can talk about this. There has to be something to copy over user data, network data, metadata, because a user is going to define them in the tenant namespace, but they have to end up as a bare metal host namespace. So there has to be some sort of controller, which for this image copies over the data to be accessible by the provisioning request. This is level 2 fine tunings, and level 3 will be integrating all this with CAPM3. And another very strong request for me is to not tie this whole effort into CAPM3, because there are people who don't use CAPM3. There are people who use CAPM3 and not CAPM3, and that ideally it has to work with both cases. We have to account for people who don't provision clusters or provision something else. I'm actively working on these cases. Jacob, who is probably here, is actively working on these cases in our team. So yeah, I hope this summary is useful. That's how I understand the proposal, both Zane's and how Leonard summarized it. And the host claims proposal should also address some of the points I brought up. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So maybe the solution is is there a real difference between the bare metal inventory and the hardware details? In the sense that the bare metal inventory is a list of hardware details? Or maybe a view on the hardware details if you don't want to give too much to the end user. And if you do that and you make it visible for everybody, then it's probably true that in those claims, we don't need so much of the status to make it work. As long as we know with which hardware we have been linked, then it simplifies those claims by for the user, if he needs to know where his hardware details are, he just look at the resource. But this resource, as you said, is readable and only readable by everybody.
I guess a couple of contentious points here would be hardware details readable by literally everybody is something many admins will not agree, because there may be users who can use this bare metal, we call it bare metal as a service in Red Hat, just where you have multi-tenant bare metal access. Some users may not have access to that, and hardware details are not entirely insensitive, I would say. And point number two, even I do see all hardware details in all namespaces. I don't know which one I can actually access, because again, I can imagine that in some deployments, the administrator will not want to give all users access to all bare metal hosts. There may be a situation where as a user I can only access the ones with NVIDIA GPUs because I need them, but not the ones that are used for, I don't know, Bitcoin mining, sorry. Because I shouldn't mine Bitcoins. Making things up, right? But it seems quite realistic that there has to be some separation. And as a user, I have to know which of them are accessible to me.
When I mean all user, I just mean the users that can share a given set of bare metal hosts. So you can still use Airbag to write some group of bare metals to a complete group of users. But if you had two users who could use a pool of servers and really trade the servers between them to improve the to not have separate resources, then they would have the same Airbag policy on this set of hosts.
Let me see, summarize it right in the comment. So you're saying essentially if namespace is a pool, so if I see hardware details in namespace, it automatically means I can provision all the corresponding hosts, even if I don't see bare metal host objects themselves. But if I see hardware details, I can use them. Is it what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, I need to sit on this thought for a while.
There is there a drawing for your host claim that I could show and maybe try to show it side by side of the inventory? I'm wondering what's the best to support your question. Like what is the best thing to show for the folks here? Just the claim or one of these drawings or? Should we just... I mean, I just want some background for people to be able to a bit better see what we are talking about, because from the Zim proposals perspective, I can show this, like what would be in the inventory is the label selector and the allocated and available host, and we have this drawing. But I would like to somehow highlight the differences that we have in the host claim proposal and compared to this one. So now I would like to kind of have people compare these two in their heads. That's
So
fine. Yep.
I think I can summarize on the end proposal. It's easier. You had the Lennart drawing of the proposal shown 10 seconds ago. So bare metal image and the shutdown request is really the spec part of those claims. And the hardware detail is more or less what we give back in the tasters part of those claims. But as said, it can be a good idea to just show the hardware details, put them in a separate resource, and just keep the in the host claim status the name of the hardware detail we need to look at.
Okay, I have a question. So is hardware detail in that sense, does it contain all the information for a consumer to know that if I want to consume a BMH, is that all details that we need to put on a host claim? Or do we have any other information that is missing there currently?
It's mostly so hardware details is inspection data, right? For those who don't know.
Yes.
I'm speculating in the chat that some users may care potentially. I don't have an immediate solid use case, but I can imagine some people care if it's virtual media or not. That's probably the only thing that is not in hardware details because it's a property of a driver and not of hardware itself also much. Otherwise, I don't know. I think hardware details is more interesting because it tells you really what hardware that is, like models, networking, stuff like this.
But looking at the way we use bare metal hosts, you have all the labels and annotations that are consumed in metadata, and the existence of selector, probably it should be put with the hardware detail if you want to make it easy to use. For example, well, we'll speak later of the HTTP/LS, but an example is that sometimes you would like the IP to be just annotations on your bare metal host. And it's an important part of knowledge you need. And if we want to make it work, that we have all the information necessary in the hardware detail, then this kind of information should be pushed at the level of the hardware detail. Or we need again a new resource just for that. But I think the best way is to put it on the hardware detail.
I think that would be a bit difficult, no, because I mean, I can agree to the example that Dimitri gave that there would be still, even if it's small, some detail are out of hardware details, which might be also good. So I would say that hardware detail can be one piece of information, but it should not be the only piece of information.
If it is not the only piece of information, we will also need to have an object that is does not contain more than these others, and that is in read-only access to the consumer.
If I read the host claims proposal right, I haven't read it in a while, but I seem to remember it's talking about adding some sort of access control field on bare metal host, which defines which host claim namespaces can use that. I think that is actually your new resource. So it should not go to bare metal host, but it probably should go to some sort of new resource, similar to how we have now host update policy resource, which only defines how things, how like firmware updates can run and stuff like this. So maybe that's a solution.
And maybe one comment that in Zane's proposal is quite also we already have this hardware detail resource, so that's something that we are commenting on. So that has been implemented since, if I remember correctly. So
Yes, that's correct. And there is one gotcha. It's only created on inspection. So if you disable inspection or you haven't run inspection yet, okay, if you want to deploy something, you have run inspection, unless it's disabled. People sometimes disable inspection for one reason or the other, in which case hardware details is not going to exist. And that could be quite a roadblock here.
Yeah.
Unless we implement additionally a redfish-based inspection, which is a thing in Ironic, but it's not a thing in BMO. So kind of have two paths of inspection where if inspection is enabled, we do the normal in-band agent-based inspection. If it's disabled, we don't disable it completely, but we run a redfish-based inspection, get some base information, and yeah, create this resource for this purpose. So that would be another change that has to go into the scope.
And is there any difference on the hardware details information in between these two?
Definitely, you cannot discover IP addresses, for example, through Redfish. For obvious reasons, you cannot do HTTP. There is some effort to do, God, how it's called, LLDP discoveries through Redfish. Apparently, some hardware does it, but a lot of models probably won't. So it's definitely going to be less information. But you still can discover network interfaces, basic CPU information, stuff like this. So it won't be completely out of blue. And there's a contributor in Ironic world who is not here, I believe, who is very keen on making Redfish inspection on par with agent-based. So if it's not there, there's definitely interest and people actively working on getting it closer.
Yeah, I think that would be an interesting thing to do, and probably would help this use case as well.
And for things like IP address, there's a lot of people who would rather like to use things that are completely external to inspection, and we usually have things like I don't remember the name, Logiblock or something like that, Logi something. They make hardware inventory that already exists, and where people managing hardware completely provision how their networking is configured, and they prefer to extract it from this source rather than from trying inspection.
Sorry, folks, I wanted to interrupt you with a question if anyone is taking notes, because there's so many useful things being discussed, and I don't see anything in the document. It would be very sad if you have to listen to this 1 hour of discussion again to remember what stuff has been proposed.
Yeah, I can take notes. I thought I would take the notes from the meeting chat because that will be saved when I save the discussion. But to be honest, mm, hard to pick up what's important and what's questions here for me, to be honest. So I would encourage everyone to feel free to write your ideas under the topics. Like I can grant write or editor rights to this. So if there's someone who has no editor rights, just ping me. I can give it to you. And let's try to fill it up. I will pick up the comments and place them there, but also feel free to edit it.
Yeah, I've summarized the redfish inspection discussion in the chat for your later access.
Thanks. Okay, I see. Okay, if you have any access problems with the Google Docs, just write to the chat and I will move everything to the Google Doc. Don't worry about that. So I guess now we will just collect all these things and then return to the discussion. Okay, that was one question. I think that's also interesting to mention here. I just separate now. I just put that down. So I think this could be useful for many folks. So the question was that how different is the host plane from the bare metal image? And then basically the answer is that it's the same thing, different order. So I will try to phrase this one also clear. Just this Zoom is super slow for some reason. Okay. I will also talk a little bit because I still have some things unclear to me. I more or less understand this one, the the combination of the multi-tenancy with the BMH decoupling. I understand this concept. For me, with this one, the only issue was I have more of a user experience problem, not problem, but like very related to this one. It's mainly that in my eyes, we all agree that to achieve the multi-tenancy, we need to somehow provide a list of the BMHs and make them accessible across these namespaces, and then they wouldn't be directly picked up by the CAPM3, but through either this allocation inventory system or the host claim system. We have two different ways, but anyway, we agree about that. So I think that's fine. For me, what was little bit worrying is that this shutdown request and the image is also, we want to separate them. And I understand that there are organizations where, this was actually my comment also on that proposal, that I understand that there are organizations where this is the requirement. But if we look at large, our users, that might be a very minority position. So for many folks, this might actually cause additional workload to manage the RBAC and manage like just in fact manage these resources and know and track them and know about them. And many folks would not delegate this to separate user group. It would be just managed by the same people. So in many deployments, even in like, as I heard, in enterprise, in telco, in different spaces, having a BMH is still fine. Like people who have access to the BMH are already admin and trusted. So I was wondering that if it's really necessary, because in principle I understand why this would be required by some folks, but would that be possible to implement in a way that it's optional, so that we would keep the regular BMH, what we have today, and then these image and shutdown requests could be separated on demand. I was wondering about that. That how do you see that as an option? And anyone can chime in. It's just it's just my question about this, because for me number of CRs are keep growing, and I don't know if every user would benefit from the fact that we have separate shutdown request and separate image CR. Yeah, Leonard?
Yes. If I understand correctly, it would still be possible to just use the bare metal host itself. Like you would be like the super user and you do everything through that. But I may have missed some details that's possible. But I thought that it was more like by default or like as a base you have that, and you can do the power on power off just by editing it. But then to get multi-tenancy, we sort of protect that in its own namespace, and then the user has access through a different way. And then they obviously can't edit it directly.
Mhm.
But I agree with the concern with all the different CRs. I mean, it becomes complicated.
I sort of disagree with that. I would actually stop people from updating bare metal host eventually. I think it's more convenient, but we don't create Kubernetes pods by editing the node resource, right? It would be ridiculous, absolutely. We're it's really the same sort of mixing concerns, except that bare metal is traditionally an admin-only activity, so we haven't paid so much attention. Nobody would seriously use Kubernetes if you had to edit the node resource, but we kind of got away with that. But we also, if you think about it, we have very awkward API in places, right? Are you sure that everyone here that you can tell me a correct way to deprovision any bare metal host? I'm sure that at least half of you will have a gotcha there. Right? So one thing, I'm deleting a provisioning request, image, call it whatever, host claim, and it gets deprovisioned. It's nice and clear. It uses a delete request to API. It's very obvious. Were you all of you answering this question remember about custom deploy? Probably not everyone would remember that, right? So there is a thing about this, like reprovisioning is also a common cause of confusion by our people, like what constitutes deprovisioning. So I think shutdown request, I think it goes a bit too far to my taste, but bare metal image, it's not a blocker for this work, to be clear, right? We can proceed with host claims work without immediately blocking it on bare metal image. But I firmly believe the final shape should have that. And I think we're going to get used to that and we'll just find that it's a better API. It's just going to be awkward while we're introducing this change and relearning how to use it and teaching people how to use that. It's for greater good. I strongly believe that.
Okay, I see. I see here an interesting thing appearing as we discuss. So that we come back to the conclusion that this sort of the decoupling the shutdown and then decoupling the image, it might be not even that how to say big of a problem. We can bring that functionality in later, even like it's not blocking us to do anything. We can do this decoupling in parts, but then our focus and our contentions are all around how would the carpentry pick a BMH. That's basically what's the core question here. And then if I do understand that right, let's dive into that. Let's try focus on that. So I will just check the allocation of the inventory because I would like to compare this somehow with the with the other proposal. Sadly, I cannot share. Maybe if how would I share this the way that you could see both side by side, other than me jumping back and forth. Right. Yeah.
Are you sharing the?
I'm sharing just
window.
the application window. Yeah, I might have to switch.
If it's one window,
Yeah, I might to switch to the whole screen, sharing the whole screen. Let's see. But the problem is that my screen is quite cluttered because there is the chat and everything. So it would be also confusing. Okay, let's not do that right now. I will just try to do it somehow by speaking. So let me understand this allocation because this is still not something that's clear to me. But feel free to continue the discussion. I'm just trying to make sense in my head between the two approach of picking up the BMH. picking the PMH, selecting it.
I think a part of the problem is that Zane's proposal is not really finalized.
Yeah, that's true.
So we're a bit speculating and designing on spot. The host claims proposal is more finished, but we're trying to add missing parts to it from the proposal, which is not finalized.
Yes, that's true.
And I still think that they are a little complementary in the sense what I said in the chat is that you still need something that let you as a control on one resource at a time and then give it back to somebody else without completely changing the airbag roles you're having. And the way to do that is the host claim controller is just managing the allocation and copying from one namespace to the other, so that at some point you are allowed to have this bare metal image, and at another point you do not. Or if you do not have this, then it means that the link to the bare metal image is handled somewhere else. But still, I think you have a problem of cross namespace to manage it. Something that those claim as it is do.
Leonard, I've seen your hand.
Yeah, thanks. I may be missing something, but so I will try to describe how I understood it. So with the host claim proposal, the host claim itself has a host selector, right? And the proposal would be to add something to the bare metal host that says from where can you claim this. So you have both sides. The user says, what do I want to select? But also the admin says, who can select me? And I think the same idea was in Zane's proposal, was just not on the bare metal host. I think it was the allocation. What was the name? Bare metal allocation, because there was some field for image namespace or something like this.
Yes, I can.
So yeah, so maybe it's not as fine-grained, but it's at least the same idea that you are specifying bare metal hosts or no, what was it? Bare metal images from that namespace can claim this bare metal host. So what I'm trying to say is it feels like they are quite trying to do the same thing. Question is, should this allocation, or what you call it, be on the bare metal host or separate? I don't know.
I think if the bare metal image reside in a namespace of its own, and you do not really control, well, it's the controller that controls the selection. Yes, host claim and bare metal image are more or less the same.
Excellent. Then it seems we want the same thing at least. So I'm very happy. Means we should be able to finalize some kind of design then.
Okay. Uh-huh. Okay. let me check the agenda and what we have there. Because I want to also write up some action points where to go with this, because based on this, we really do want the same, and that would actually make these basically the same topic, and then we have one actually formalized one. So I will for tentatively put that. I would go ahead with forward with this. This, even though we have some clarification, some stuff to clarify still. But this is a more up-to-date proposal in general, and now there's even the REST API part has been removed. So what I would say tentatively is that I would actually just use this as a sort of idea box. Their own proposals, as it seems that multi-tenancy, from multi-tenancy perspective, if the host claim proposal can satisfy the goals of this. Is there anyone who disagrees with this? So that the parts that were related to the multi-tenancy in the PMO decoupling can be handled by this host claim, or already the host claim includes that functionality. Is there anyone who disagrees with that? Because if there are no one who would disagree with that, we can actually remove this one, the decoupling, from the picture in terms of multi-tenancy. So what I mean is that we would have that same functionality anyways introduced by the host claim, so that later when we would do decoupling, then we would just decouple the shutdown and the image and whatever extra feature we might need to decouple. But for the sake of having separate RBAC controls, but from multi-tenancy, we don't have to focus on this one. That's my, I think it should be implemented. Yeah, that's my point of view.
Sorry, can you take it one more time? I'm trying to keep up.
So that as we were looking at the two proposals from multi-tenancy perspective, what I was saying is that this logic of the old informal proposal, the decoupling proposal, the inventory and the allocation is contained already inside the host claim logic, what is proposed. So that no,
I have agreed that I could modify my proposal, so that, well, for the inventory, I could modify my proposal so that the inventory can be handled by this host claim. So that, no, I have agreed that I could modify my proposal so that I could modify my proposal so that the inventory can be handled by this host claim. So that, no.
Sorry, can you take it one more time? I'm trying to keep up.
Well, for the inventory, it goes with the hardware detail, but that is not part of the of what you have right now. The simplification has come through the discussion, but those claims as you have it today, you need to modify it to use the inventory as a collection of hardware details.
Okay. But then
I can modify it to do that.
okay. Okay, that clarifies it. So I will just rephrase it then that can with modification. So with some modification we can bring in that functionality of the inventory. Okay. So if I phrase it this way, then we agree that the host claim can handle it. Okay. I don't really see or hear any objections, and thanks for the clarification. I think now we have the 15 minutes of break, and feel free to continue the discussion. I will move to our side, and when I will come back, then we will continue with the two other proposals, the DHCP less and the high availability for the ISO, and then if we still have some time, we can go back and discuss the previous ones. Yep. Thanks for now, and we will continue 15 minutes later. Okay, just for the information, we are coming back. Let me just quickly check the participant list. Okay. I will open the new or the next proposal. The HCPS item.
Hi all. Yeah, so I guess maybe I can provide a quick summary on this as the author. Firstly, I wanted to apologise. This proposal has been under discussion for more than a year now, and frankly, I've been struggling to find time to work on it. I'm very open to collaboration with others in the community. Also, I wanted to introduce Marco, one of my colleagues, who I hope may be able to help with this in the coming months. I think it's still an important gap that I would like to see closed. And yeah, hopefully we could discuss the current status today and ensure that we're all aligned.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
1 second, I just need to close my door. 1 second.
Yep, sure. Short.
Okay, so perhaps it would be helpful just for those who haven't been following too closely to give a quick summary of the motivation behind this this proposal. So there's an IP address management solution integrated into Metal3 via CAP-M3. It allows you to control IP addresses and network configuration for only the deployed operating system. So this presents a problem if you're deploying in a DHCP-less environment, because you also need to configure networking for the IPA RAM disk during the inspection and pre-provisioning phase. We do have an API in the bare metal host that allows you to specify that configuration, but currently the only option is to specify it statically via a secret. And so the proposal was basically trying to solve that problem and extend the current IP address management integration so we can configure the pre-provisioning network configuration for IPA and also the current solution for the deployed OS. There is also a second step to this, which I haven't yet had time to work on, which is currently the IP address management templating in CAP-M3 only works for Cloud init. I think several of us in the community are also interested in other first boot implementations. So once we solve this part of the problem, I'd be very interested in making that a bit more pluggable, perhaps having support for Ignition or other tools in the future. But where we got to with this is there's been some excellent discussion. Dimitri, Zane, Adam, Lennart, you've all provided great input. Also, Pierre, thank you for all of the discussion so far. My original proposal was to add a new controller to CAP-M3 and basically reuse the existing model where you have Metal3 data template, which creates Metal3 data and Metal3 data claim, and ultimately that renders a secret for network data. We could just do the same and render the pre-provisioning network data secret. We had quite a long discussion along those lines, and ultimately I think the conclusion we reached was it would be preferable to have that controller and API live alongside the bare metal host API in bare metal operator. I think logically that's probably the right direction, and it also ties into some of the multi-tenancy separation of concerns we were just talking about. The reason I haven't yet reworked the proposal to align with that is it's a bit more complicated than I initially thought, because it's not just having a data template resource and a secret. In the CAP-M3 world, we have Metal3 data and the data claim that allows you to figure out the index for the IP address from the IP pool. So one thing I wanted to discuss today was, what do we think about those APIs? Do we need to basically replicate the same or very similar APIs in the BMO in order to enable a data template and a rendering in BMO? How can we handle that potential duplication of both the API and the implementation? So I think that's all solvable, but one of the reasons I've struggled to find time is I think it probably does need a bit of thought and discussion to make sure we make the right design choices there. And particularly if we want to make things more pluggable, I wanted to avoid just copy pasting and replicating APIs without considering the scope for future flexibility. So yeah, Dimitri has a good question. So this is another kind of big question that I'd like us to answer as a community. Do we envisage the CAPM3 solution remaining supported in the long term, or would we envisage some kind of a migration to something which could be a V2 implementation in BMO? And again, that might inform some of the design and API choices we need to make. The simplest option would just be replicate all of the APIs, but as I mentioned, I think there are some aspects of the current API that I would like to see change in the future, and in particular, the coupling with Cloud Init, I think, is a problem for several of us consuming Metal3 downstream.
Thank you. I think this was a very good introduction. Thank you. I don't completely understand this question from you, Dimitri, that cannot we migrate the CAPM3 to the new API eventually? My understanding was that now it's kind of clear that for this HCP plus pre-provisioning data support, we need to make the IPAM work with the BMO so that we can generate this config data based on the template and what Steven has explained. But then the CAPM3 integration with the IPAM for the similar purposes, then that's done like that, as far as I understand, because the CAPI has the bootstrap controllers, so that we basically prepare the data for them. So, and they are basically out of the scope of what the BMO does. Like they already like that script and that data is used in the pre-cube ADM and post-cube ADM stage and in the Cloud Init running on the node image. So for me it's I wouldn't really pick one or the other. I think we need this integration in both in the BMO and in the CAPM3. And of course, there is we also have to support the CAPI IPAM API, and there is ongoing work, but that's still like that's the node level configs or the network config for the deploy nodes, and I see that's clearly separated from this pre-provisioning what we have to solve here.
So I guess that's an interesting question to answer. Do we think it would be okay to have two parallel implementations? Obviously, we can figure out ways to refactor to share implementation, but there may be use cases where you want to control all of the networking, the pre-provisioning networking, but also the post-deploy networking as an administrator who owns the network and the bare metal host. And in that case, you might decide not to use the CAPM3 resources at all. But obviously, we do have existing users who may be reliant on the current API, so we can't just remove them. So perhaps we could support both models with some similar but separate APIs. The first set being aligned with bare metal operator and bare metal host, and the CAPM3 ones would only support configuration of the deployed OS and not the pre-provisioning phase.
Yeah, it's a bit. I think the core of the issue, at least for me, is that on the CAPI level there is no concept of pre-provisioning. That's very unique to us, and that's very unique to how we do things. And yeah, I also understand where this idea came from. That let's say we would remove the integration with the iPhone from the CAPM3 and put it into BMO, because anyways the CAPM3, like 99% of the cases, would use the BMO to, or I think in all cases, would use the BMO to do any of the either pre-provisioning or provisioning network configuration. So that makes sense, but I'm just wondering that would that have any negative effect on this bootstrap providers, like the KubeADM bootstrap provider, like would there be any conflicts there? Yes, Lyle?
I think you're muted, Leonard.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm not sure I have an answer to your question, Adam, if it would impact the bootstrap providers. I think they are mainly concerned with the user data, probably. But anyway, I from my perspective, the CAPM3 specific IP address manager, I would expect that that goes away in the long run. I think it makes sense that CAPM3 supports the cluster API IPAM well, copy is supposed to work with all the providers and should work with CAPM3 also. So we should work in that way. That will never support pre-provisioning, so we need a different solution for that. But it would be weird to have CAPM3 be like the middleman there doing all the things. And I want to add also that the specific features that we have now in the Metal3 IPAM, like the node reuse stuff or IP reuse, I think it's basically a mistake. It should not be at that level. That should, if you want to have fixed IPs for your bare metal hosts, that makes perfect sense on the BMO level. So we should just move it there. And if you don't want that, then you can use the copy IPAM.
Yeah, node reuse is actually not an IPAM feature, by the way.
Okay.
So it sounds like potentially we might end up needing three proposals. One is to add the IPAM and templating to BMO for the standalone use case, and for the case where you want your operator to control networking via the bare metal host scope. The second one would be potentially to look at how we can migrate the current CAPM3 IPAM integration towards alignment with the upstream CAPI community IPAM integration, because I know that has evolved over time, and as Leonard mentioned, probably what we currently have is not the right solution in the longer term. And then the third one that I alluded to earlier is adding some additional flexibility around the first boot tooling choices, where we want to generate a different flavor of network data and not only cloud in it. So I guess if we could agree that those three things are reasonable areas to explore, and we can figure out the subset of folks who might have some cycles to work on it, yeah, maybe we can try and make progress. My proposal would be to rework my current PR so that it solves just for the bare metal operator part of the problem, and then maybe we can have follow-up proposals for the second two.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I will add this that so okay, so
just to note that I think there is already, if you haven't noticed, there is already work going on to integrate CAPM3 with the CAPI IPAM. And I don't know if Pepe is on the call, but she is the one who's actually working on it. And she has tested. It works well, what we have checked so far. It's only these extra features that IP use, for example, what Leonard mentioned, which perhaps now need a new home so that we can possibly retire the CAPM3 item and solely use CAPI item for the provisioning data, metadata purpose, and then for the rest, I think this BMO or your would be better place to do.
Yeah, I have to confess I haven't had time to follow that. If there are relevant links, feel free to paste them into the doc, and obviously will be important context to follow up on. Okay, well, it sounds like we're aligned. If there is any other questions or concerns, feel free to ask. Um, my suggestion would be I'll try and find time to do a final pass on the current PR. Hopefully, we could reach the point where we're in agreement enough that that can merge. And I'm going to work with Marco to hopefully unblock some of the implementation. But if anyone else in the community would like to collaborate, I'd be very grateful for any additional help. I think it's a fairly large piece of work, and hopefully we can find ways to collaborate and spread that workload if others are, interested in helping to move this forwards.
Just one question. So that was you mentioned, and I very much agree that eventually we as a community would like to extend the supported network data format to make other configuration managers apart from Cloudinit more or compatible with our workflows. I was wondering that other than bringing in some so what would be actually needed for that? Because I was actually thinking about these bootstrap providers, but I realized that for the network data, they are actually not that important. The bootstrap provider itself, it's even if we would just have the config drive attached to a node, the cloud init, for example, in our case, would take care of that. So other than rendering the network data in like in an like ignition compatible or other tool compatible format and generate the secret with that, would there be anything else that's needed?
I mean, I think making the rendering pluggable is the main thing, and making sure that the backend implementation doesn't bleed through into the API that we provide. I guess the other part is the IPA image itself. Currently, downstream we use a custom IPA image that has got an mstate derived tool inside. I believe OpenShift is doing something fairly similar. So there might be an opportunity for some collaboration around the configuration of IPA in the future, perhaps, or at least agreement that there's a specific tool that we're all interested in, like nmstate and Kubernetes nmstate. I think is something quite a few of us have an interest in. If there's scope for alignment and collaboration around that, I think it would be helpful. But for now, I think having custom downstream IPA round disk images is okay. But if we can make progress, on the API and controller side of it, I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I agree. It's also an interesting situation that we might be able to support that the configuration in the network data format could be actually different for the IPA and different for the node image or the provisioned machine itself. And that could also, I mean, in most cases, I would assume people use the same distro to like deploy, but not in all cases. So the IPA is not always the same. Uses the same distribution as whatever node image you are deploying or disk image you are deploying. So there could be even vendor specific restrictions. So yeah, I very much agree that this has to be pluggable. And we might actually need to make this kind of a focus of this work. Yeah, I think we are aligned. I think we completely agree because we don't know what sort of data formats will come in the future.
No, I think you're right. We definitely do need to have the flexibility to decouple the syntax for IPA and the downstream host image. A bare metal operator only allows you to specify a single IPA round disk image, so you would need to make a choice as to what the tool inside that image is. And then, as you mentioned, there may well be use cases for deploying multiple OS flavors via the bare metal host. So I was thinking part of the API would be, some choice over the rendering format, and we would need to work out the details on a future proposal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello. So I've been working on the IPAM, and I just wanted to give as my input at this point that I think this should start from looking at how we can integrate BMO, IPAM with the BMO, because it is like it was said that our IPAM or the Metal3 IPAM only differs from the copy IPAM in with the pre-allocated IPs spec, which is like where you can tell that claims with this certain name will give out these IP addresses, which is very it's simple, but it's very it doesn't work in the way that it should. And as I discussed with the copy IPAM or the person who has mostly worked on the copy IPAM, they are not interested in taking that feature to themselves, because that's something very bare metal specific that you have need for a certain machine or certain whatever resource to get the same IP address, because in other cases it shouldn't really matter what IP whichever resource gets. So yeah, I'm thinking that it would be very good to look at IPAM with BMO as the first step to see if we can like actually take all of that logic out from everything else, and then we could retire the Metal3 IPAM and switch to use the copy IPAM. And one more thing that is probably very confusing to the users currently is that when you deploy the Metal3 IPAM, it creates an IP address resource, but copy also provides a resource with that same name, and they're doing almost the same thing. So whenever you're deploying the whole KEPM3 system, you will have resources doing the same thing. So that's something that I think we should get rid of, because that can be very, very confusing. And you can't not have a copy deploy those resources, so you will always have those duplicates. And I will copy my PRs that I have made in regards to IPAM things, so you can take a further look. But this is what I'm thinking about this matter.
Yeah, it would be great to collaborate on this. I must confess I haven't looked deeply into the upstream CAPI IPAM status, so learning from your experience would be incredibly helpful. My initial focus was really just on what we already had in CAPM3, and I think the scope of this work since we first started discussing it has expanded quite considerably. So yeah, if you could provide any links, that would be great, and perhaps we can discuss further on a future community call or on Slack.
Yeah, I'm happy to help with this in any way I can.
Great, thank you.
That was actually a very good discussion, and I think we have touched on everything, at least that I can remember from that issue, like the issue discussions or the TR discussions. And thanks, Papi, for also updating from the CAPI IPAM side. Yeah, Kashi?
I vaguely heard when I was walking to the meeting that Stephen, you mentioned that there is interest from your side to work on exposing KEPM3 to more toolings aside from cloud. if I heard that correctly, actually, I have also that agenda on my desk, so I would be interested to collaborate on that.
Yeah, definitely. Happy to collaborate. As I mentioned, our network configuration toolchain is orientated around NM state, but the actual OS that we're primarily targeting uses Ignition. And I know there's others in the community in a similar situation. So definitely happy to collaborate and figure out ways to potentially make that integration easier in the future.
One thing I would like to still check, so as far as I understand, we don't really have, like, you revert your proposal and it will focus on integrating the template rendering and these things, with, like the IPAM itself with the BMO first, just to have the capability to provide pre-provisioning network data. I don't think we have any contradictions with the multi-tenancy or any sort of problems. I don't think, because whatever however the implementation will look like at the end, we will have a logic to pick up a BMH or select a BMH for a MetaCube machine, and it is. Oh, but then at that point it might have been inspected. So the integration happens even before. So whenever the BMH is instantiated, it's already talking to IPAM, and potentially if the pre-provisioning network data is configured. So yeah. So I'm just wondering if because we separated the CAPM3 responsibilities and the BMOs or the namespaces. I'm just wondering if we need something for the IPAM. Or what I mean is that certain, is it reasonable to have like multiple users because of multi-tenancy with multiple IPAMs? I'm just wondering about that. Like multiple IPAMs with multiple IP ranges, or just one IPAM but with multiple IP ranges where they are allocating IPs from. I'm not sure where to put, because here we put the IP pool completely on the consumer level and all these IPAM related things. But if it's on the consumer level, then that means that at the beginning or initially on the consumer side, we cannot talk to the BMHs until we have selected them. Thus, we cannot provide pre-provisioning network data. If I just look at this picture.
Yeah, I mean, I think as has already been described on the bottom right, the whatever IPAM resources we need, IP pool and any other template resources would need to be managed by the infrastructure team alongside the bare metal host for the pre-provisioning phase. I guess the open question, I guess, is what happens to the consumer level IP configuration. Perhaps that moves up into the inventory on the top right, and then you would have potentially a different IP pool, which would be used to render the network data separate from the pre-provisioning network data. I guess the interesting question there is what happens if you want to use the same IP range. So you just use the same IP for inspection and pre-provisioning, and you deploy the OS and then come up with the same IP. That was one of the use cases described in my proposal, and I'm a bit unclear how that will work in this model.
When you want to do that, you can do it by pushing the address you've got during the pre-provisioning phase as an annotation on your bare metal host, and then you consume the annotation. You do not go through the IPAM on the consumer side. but it's only when you have the same network for pre-provisioning and for the cluster. And I'm not sure that in the long run, there will be a lot of cases where you would do that. If you look at, because at some point you want network isolation. If you look at things like Deutsche Telekom host, I've forgotten the name, but you put a VXLAN network, and it's on this that your cluster will live, and you only need probably a fixed IP that comes from, but it's two different level, and you can do it just by pushing an annotation, and then you will have the real network on your VXLAN that is handled with standard IPAM on cluster side.
Yeah, I guess we can follow up and discuss that in more detail. Another option would be that the infrastructure team derived template is used to generate both the pre-provisioning network data and the deployed OS network data. But obviously that would potentially take control away from the user. This is probably something we'll need to discuss in more detail on the proposal. But yeah, thanks for the thoughts.
Yep, I will just write the notes. Maybe now we won't go live. Okay. We can soon start with the standalone. I'm just thinking if there's anything else we have to write down here.
Okay, I think I captured that last part of the discussion, but feel free to modify if I missed anything.
Yeah,
Okay, that was all I had on this topic. Unless anyone has any other thoughts, I think we could move on. But please feel free to reach out to me, and be happy to collaborate to try and move this forward in the next few months.
Yeah. I also think that I don't really have anything else related to this. I think it was good discussion. Yeah, let's collaborate and let's try to keep this one in the focus in the next months. Yep, I think let's continue then to the standalone operator, and if we have some time, then we can still discuss any of the topics. Okay, so if there are no other questions, I'm checking the chat. Nothing. Okay, then ERSO, high availability design. Let me check. Are you here, Dimitri? Yes, you
I'm
are.
definitely here.
Yes. Would you like to introduce this one, folks? I think this is one of the least known topic this year, so it's very new.
That's sad. I would expect it to be very popular. Just kidding. Anyway, I haven't prepared a lot of discussions here, but I wanted to run through a few key moments of the proposal. And by the way, reading the book is pretty difficult. There is an approved spec, I mean, design proposal, which does list it has a summary of everything we discussed and everything we ended up more or less agreeing on. I will reiterate a few things that are actually agreed on in this design proposal just to make sure people are aware of and to check if anyone has any fresh thoughts on the same topics. I will also raise at least a couple of relatively new questions that might be implicit in the design proposal or not mentioned there at all. And if we have time, we can argue about host networking and how we get rid of that if there's still interest. So without further ado, the list of topics seems on the Google Doc. And first thing, I believe that's the most agreed upon thing is for MVP of HA architecture, we're going to target virtual media only. That is for the obvious reason that DNS mask and general DHCP handling is a big part of the problem. So if we cut this problem temporarily out of the picture, we have much more realistic chances to get MVP done in some reasonable time frame. Any objections to that? I didn't expect it to be very controversial, but still. I'll take it as no. The next thing that I would like just clarify, we've discussed it in depth with Leonard, Adam, and other folks, and the end result so far, which doesn't have to be end result forever, but the end result so far is ironic running as daemon set and control plane nodes. And it does play a bit awkwardly with recently introduced node selector on the ironic resource, but we're gonna see what we do about that. Actually, ideas are welcome because somebody introduced a node selector and I don't know how it's gonna work with the daemon set. I mean, they work with daemon set, but how it's gonna look like. Maybe it's going to be okay. The major reason we use daemon set specifically is because Ironic still has this requirement of host networking. And while there have been some interesting progress and a lot of good discussions around getting rid of this requirement, we're not quite there. And I personally don't want to block the HA work on having the host networking issue solved for good. So the shape is going to be for a typical Kubernetes deployment. You have 3 control plane nodes. You have 3 Ironic instances running on each of them with all their business except for DNS mask. More about it later. Still host networking. The nodes are spread across Ironic instances. This is how Ironic just works. It always works like that. MariaDB obviously required because SQLite is obviously local. It cannot be shared by 3 instances. So far, and I probably should write it down, there are no plans to make MariaDB itself HA or, use some kind of Galera or stuff like this. I write it down as document for the reference. So yeah, that's the overall shape of HA. So we are going from 1 Ironic instance to 3 Ironic instances. The load spread is 1 dies, the 2 remaining take over handling nodes. Are there any thoughts or objections or fresh ideas on this topic?
No, not really. I'm not concerned about the IPC or the DNS mask or these things you mentioned that we can rule them out. They can be removed from the scope for the MVP, and I think anyways, not that important at the moment. I'm wondering about this JSON RPC though. So I'm not super familiar with this. I never really run multiple ironics that would be managing the same group of machines. But for us, at least downstream, like the TLS requirements are pretty strict.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. And we already had issues with because of the eventlet and just because of how Python handles TLS enforcement or the lack of that. So I would be mostly interested in that as part of this discussion. What do we need here? Like what is still missing from this JSON RPC to be secure?
Right. So right now there's no TLS support on JSON RPC, so it has to be implemented. The problem is with host validation. The thing is, ironic instances tend to self-detect the IP address they use. So it's good when I have provisioning IP just passed in. That's a bit easier for everyone. But also the whole notion of provisioning IP becomes pretty awkward when you have 3 instances, like which IP is that? So it's probably another limitation we should talk about is right now we're going to rely on ironic self-detecting the IP address it's on, which is the default mode of operation if provisioning IP is not passed. We're probably going to pass provisioning interface or MAC addresses to any means that is not specific to one instance. So let's imagine provisioning interface for simplicity. So you get EM1 or stuff like this. Then ironic detects its IP address. Okay, all good. Now, ironic instances have to talk to each other. They don't do it via Kubernetes, obviously. They do it via RPC, JSON RPC. More specific, it's another HTTP port. It's not listening on the same endpoint as the public API. And that has to be secured through TLS. Obviously, same requirement for us, definitely. The problem is, how do they validate that, right? Because the peers don't know the host names. And the user may, when creating the certificate, may not know the IP addresses that ironic ends up on, especially if, for example, provisioning network uses DHCP. They're not even predictable. So the thought I put into the design proposal was basically the operator, ironic standalone operator, I mean, creates a CA, absolutely self-signed CA. It passes the CA information down to ironic instances. Each ironic instance can now can generate a certificate knowing its IP address already and sign it using the CA. Now they can talk to each other. Nobody else needs to talk to JSON RPC. So the fact that this CA is not exposed to anyone or trusted by anyone else is not a big deal as long as ironic instances trust the CA and generate certificates using the CA. That got into the design proposal. Nobody objected there, but I'm still curious to hear if you see any problems with that or have any better ideas.
I was just wondering if you would generate this CA anyhow with the IRSO, um, how 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 complicated would it be to generate it with something else? Like the IRSO is still an external entity to Ironic, so it's not running. What I mean, it's not running in the pods themselves. It's a separate controller. So I assume it ships these CAs as secrets, attaches them as secret, right?
Correct.
So what if we would leave this to, I don't know, cert manager? There are people here who have much more experience with cert manager than I do, like in actually maintaining it and certificate rotations and so on. But I would like to hear from you folks if the requirement is just that you have to attach a secret with the CA. Can that be done with this, or if not the CA, just the certificate itself, and make it trusted across the daemon set? I'm really asking, like I don't really have much experience with cert manager other than very basic.
From my perspective, I think attaching a CR certificate, as long as you also attach the private key, is gonna work in exactly the same way. And we can do that. Yeah, totally. Generating the certificate itself is a bit of a problem because the user may not know the IP address. So you cannot generate a certificate that has a valid subject alt name. Or you have to do some guessing work.
What I was thinking is that if it would be possible that the IRSO kind of, because I vaguely remember that with cert manager you have to create these requests, and like you have to make CRs, then the cert manager handles things. And I was just wondering what if like the IRSO knows where the demons of the demon set are, and what's their names and what service they could connect to, and like it sees them from the outside, so to speak. So it has
It
all.
doesn't necessarily. May not know.
Okay.
So imagine we are on provisioning network. There's zero Kubernetes exposure to the provisioning network.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if it's gonna get even to pod IPs, but also they're gonna be chicken and egg problem because you cannot create a pod and then use that pod IP to generate certificate and pass it to the pod because the IP address can change on that, right? We got into this situation with OpenShift one day, basically, where a pod was depending on information from the pod that may not ever converge. Yeah, Leonard.
Yeah, I was just wondering that so we need to know IPs and stuff for the outside communication, but for the inside, wouldn't it be able to somehow still use the cluster network there with the JSON RPC? Can it? Maybe I just don't know it well enough. But is it not possible to do the JSON RPC over this cluster network?
It's not impossible. It does require thinking how ironic image currently works because ironic image is very tailored to have one IP address.
Right.
So
Okay.
a lot of careful, and JSON RPC is pretty isolated. It's not terrible. It's doable. Then I'm not sure it solves a lot of problems though, because ironic standalone operator cannot predict which cluster IP the service is going to get.
No, not the IP, but if we can be in the cluster network, then we should be able to use like host name and well, oh, okay, but we are using daemon set. That would be for stateful set. They get these stable host names that you can use.
Right, yeah. That was a problem when we discussed that.
Yeah.
I don't know, understand why they don't provide names for pods, to be honest. It's one more awkward thing in Kubernetes where an obvious feature is simply missing and seems to be conscious, so it's not accidental.
It's tough. I don't know if we can get forward with this without like really going hands-on and trying things.
Yeah, I've tried a few things. The CI idea is the best thing I could come up with.
then maybe if there is a way forward with that, then maybe yeah, go for it. And if someone can come up with something else or find issues with the CA, then let's tackle it when we get there, perhaps.
That was my thinking. Yeah, just make some progress, create an MVP, show it to people, then people can say, "Oh, that's terrible," and then we can open the conversation. Okay, what do you want instead?
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're risk just discussing it in circles forever.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah, I also don't have any magic bullets to solve this.
You mentioned, Dimitri, that there is no communication outside, right? It's just the JSON RPC, like they are talking to each other only inside, right? Locally.
Yeah, it's on Ironics talking to Ironics,
Yeah.
not IPA or anything else.
I think
BMO, no.
this CA idea is the best thing that we have. It should be good.
Any more thoughts before we move on to the next question? So the next question is about MariaDB. I'll be curious, probably, is Steve still here? Oh, you're here, great.
Yeah.
I was thinking about MariaDB, and a thought came to my mind that we probably should even enforce using a persistent volume for MariaDB. Otherwise, with MariaDB being separate, we're going to have situations where it restarts and the data is completely lost. And BMO can recover data, but it's going to be very awkward downtime moment. And we cannot talk so much about HA architecture in this. I mean, MariaDB is still not HA, but I guess persistent volume gave it at least a resilience towards any updates. But then I know, Steve, you hit problems with major upgrades of MariaDB. And I believe you do use persistent volumes of MariaDB, don't you?
So we actually switched to using SQLite recently, in part due to those upgrade problems. So,
Okay, good.
but
Okay.
I think it's a good topic to discuss. So, yes, we in the Metal Cube chart that we're maintaining downstream, you have the option to use Metal Cubed, and you have the option to you have the option to use MariaDB with a persistent volume. And the problem we faced was if you have data from a previous MariaDB version, and then you upgrade to a newer version of MariaDB, and you particularly if you don't have a clean shutdown of the MariaDB container, at that point the replay log version doesn't match, and you can end up having problems upgrading from one version of MariaDB to another. We honestly have not fully solved that problem yet. I think it's obviously solvable. Plenty of people have persistent MariaDB environments, but you need to have a way of doing the MariaDB upgrade as part of the general Kubernetes workflow. So I think that's something to be aware of, and we would need to make sure we test moving between one MariaDB version and another. Maybe others in the community have experience of solving this problem with existing MariaDB backed deployments, but certainly I don't think it's currently solved in our MariaDB image, and we would potentially need to look at having the standalone operator or the image that we depend on handle that problem.
So at the very least, it sounds like we need to introduce versioning for MariaDB image, because once we move to CS10, I quite suspect they're gonna update the major version, so we're gonna hit this exact problem. If not right now, then CS11. So maybe we should start tagging MariaDB image at least with the distribution it uses, or the MariaDB major version it uses, so that our XML operator becomes aware of which major version it uses. It can, for example, launch a job that will upgrade. that maybe run to jobs that first will use the old version to replace the log, and then use the new version to upgrade, or vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's various ways we can solve this. I started trying to solve it using pod lifecycle hooks, which I think would be one approach. Another option would be markers in the container, which allows it to trigger upgrade when the version doesn't match. But I think we would need to explore that as a community and reach consensus as to how best to handle it. I'm sure there's prior art that we can also leverage from adjacent communities as well, but as I mentioned, we decided to switch to SQLite for a couple of reasons, but this was one of the reasons, was to defer that additional work.
So we're not talking about major versions. How major is major? Because Ricardo is saying 10.5 in CS9 and 10.11 in CS10. Is it enough to cause a problem, or we're looking at the move to 11?
So in our environment, even a minor version update is a problem, particularly if you don't have a clean shutdown, because you end up that there's basically a replay log that attempts to recover from the unclean shutdown. But yeah, I think we would need to look at the various cases and how to recover from them. But there's an MariaDB upgrade process that we would need to account for. Just starting the container with existing data from an older version doesn't necessarily always work.
Okay, so we may need to replace the log, for example, first, and that could be, for example, a job, and then run MariaDB upgrade. That could be another job, and it has to be orchestrated by an standalone operator.
I mean, having logic in the deployment enabled by the operator is one option. Another option is, to look at what others are doing when they're deploying MariaDB in containers, and potentially either use a different MariaDB container which already contains the necessary logic, or enhance the container that we're maintaining. I'm aware that there are several options in the community already for running MariaDB, which has a lot of this logic already inside, but we would need to do a bit of investigation and agree what the preferred choice would be there.
That's a very good point, Steve. Yeah. MariaDB is not class. How does this connect between each other? Does each manage? Yes, they manage separate set of nodes. I mean, not disjoint. I'm reading aloud the question in the chat. They're not disjoint, but yeah, Ironic basically maintains a hash ring in the database, or which helps decide which nodes go where. So each conductor registers itself in that database. Conductor is Ironic speak for Ironic instance, the part of the instance that is actually handling nodes. So each Ironic instance registers itself in the database, and this is how they discover which IP addresses or host names to use to talk to each other, by the way. And this table of active conductors is used by each instance to create a hash ring, and they end up the same hash ring because they read from the same table. I mean, eventually consistent, at least. So they know if they're responsible for a node, they know if somebody was responsible for a node and now they are. So there has to be a takeover and stuff like this. And they see when one conductor is gone, so they realize that hash ring is rebuilt, and now different conductors own different nodes. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. That's a great explanation. Thank you.
So in other words, MariaDB is not clustered, but Ironic is.
I had one other question related to this self-signed CA, because I don't know the JSON RPC and how it's implemented and what it can do. Is it possible to prompt it to do a CA rotation and then negotiate it between the daemons, like just to handle it by itself without redeploying the whole daemon set?
JSON RPC is just JSON over HTTP. There's no like fancy functionality. It's just a way to say. So this REST API, this JSON RPC, both are ways of sending JSON around the wire. There's no fancy functionality there. Anything has to be implemented by us.
Okay. Okay. So let's say, how did you envision this from the ISO controller perspective? So let's say I enable TLS. I don't know, there is a field in the spec or something. I asked RPC TLS enabled or something. If do you foresee if there would be an annotation or maybe, yeah, probably an annotation is the best, that if we put on the resource, then it would do a cert rotation. I mean, basically just delete what we have and recreate the new one without redeploying. Do you think that's something doable?
So that's what Sort Manager does, right? It can rotate things. And I
Yeah.
believe we use iNotify to restart things when it rotates them. It sounds like we can take the same approach as we use for public API HTTPS. So let Sort Manager does the rotation. When we detect the file is changed, we send seek hop to HTTPD. I think that's what we do right now, right?
I don't remember.
I quite strongly believe that's what we do. So when the secret is changed, the secret is just mounted and
Yeah.
managed by Sort Manager. Secret changes, iNotify detects that a signal to reload configuration is sent to HTTPD. It picks up the new certificate. Boom, we're done. Now we also need to make sure we regenerate certificates. So there will be a bit more bash code in this area, but not like much more.
I will write it in the comments. Okay. Yeah, I think this can be self-contained. It's fine. And then we discuss the money. Is there any other topic, Dimitri, you think we should discuss related to this?
Yeah, I put a few topics, but we can skip the DNS mask. It's not gonna take 8 minutes. I'm curious. Well, that's a lot of information. Okay. This is just my screen jumped because of the paste. The two things I wanted to mention is a philosophical question if HA mode is going to become the default ever. Just think about this. Probably not for us, I don't know, but maybe. And of course, as always, I'm looking for volunteers to help write things or at least help plan things and design things. And I think we can wrap it up on this. We definitely don't have time for another large discussion,
Yeah,
nor is it relevant to MVP.
yeah, I also think that we cannot really bring in other large discussion. Just to answer your philosophical question, if the HA becomes the default, as far as I see, no, simply because what I see folks doing in production is trying to make everything smaller in every terms, like storage, memory, CPU, everything. So more instances, bigger footprint, and I see a tendency to try to make everything as small as possible. So if someone can get away with just using one ironic, they will most likely do it. At least that's how I feel right now. But it could become recommended, because I guess HA in general is recommended like Kubernetes and in general for everything, if you have the resources. Yeah, that's how I see. I don't know how you see it.
I personally see it similarly. Would be curious to hear from other folks as well. Like Steve, would you consider using HA?
Yeah, it's something we have discussed, mostly for scale reasons. But at the moment, the chart that I just linked in the chat is just using single replica. So I think there's definitely scope for collaboration and potentially alignment with the work on the standalone operator, but it hasn't been the top of the priority list yet. But yeah, I think definitely for large scale environments, it could be a nice option to have.
Pierre or anyone? Any more takes on HA?
I tend to agree with what Steve said. I think the driver behind the adoption of this might be the push for scale, not necessarily for redundancy in this day and age. So when we think about HA, we mostly think about redundancy, but yeah, the scalability part is possibly more attractive than it seems from the initial look, just my gut feel. So it'll be interesting to watch.
There are no other opinions or comments for the HA. I would just like to mention that I don't see any further proposals. So, is there anyone who sees the need for a next or a continuation within a few weeks? Or because the other option is that we can do one of these events at the end of the year, somewhere in like the autumn, probably end of the autumn, beginning of winter time, before the holidays, and then discuss that how far we have got with these proposals and ideas, and maybe bring in new topics. But I think this is like these are quite big discussion topics and design topics. So I don't expect these to progress very quickly. But then still, I hope that maybe we will see some progress by the end of the year. So I don't exclude the possibility that we would have almost the same topics, just with the updates and we would go through those. But yeah, so is there anyone who would like to continue this session in within a few weeks or no?
So I have one topic that I didn't put on the agenda because I don't have a proposal yet, but we've had a few discussions on Slack about ARM support. And I wondered if we might have a good forum for having that discussion in future. Maybe we could do it on a regular community call, but I think several of us are interested in that, and maybe there's scope for collaboration or even community test coverage. So yeah, is that something anyone would be interested in following up on?
I'd be curious.
Yeah, just a comment. We can certainly take that on the community meetings, and if that develops into similar architectural discussion, then I think we can bring it to the next MTM also. But yeah, I've seen in the community many folks at times mentioning the ARM support. Okay, but then as far as I understand, then we will take the ARM discussion as it grows organically on the community meetings, and I can provide that platform apart from the Slack. And if there's no other topic or no one who would like to continue in a few weeks, then I will try to organize a similar meeting at the end of autumn, as I mentioned, and then I think then we can say that we have successfully concluded this meeting, and thanks for your participation. And I think this was a very good meeting. I mean, it was non-stop information exchange, so I think it was fruitful. And I think as a result of a concrete result, we kind of removed the BMOPI decoupling old proposal from the picture. We clarified that how we can do that with the host claim, and how we can kind of bend that proposal into the direction that everybody agrees. And we also agreed that there are no one who is blocking the multi-tenancy contract proposal for the CAPM3. And then I think on the DHCP and DHCP-less and Ironic HA side, we are on sync. On the DHCP-less, we are in sync related to how to proceed, and on the HA, we are in sync as we agree that what are the challenges. And what we have to figure out. And I see, Dimitri, you have raised your hand.
Yeah, I just want to use this opportunity to remind everyone that the Ironic PTG will be happening on the week of April the 7th. And everyone interested in our provisioning backend, discussions around that are very welcome to participate.
Thanks. That's very good to know. Okay, then I think that was all for this MTM. Thank you, everybody, and I hope we will meet on the community meetings and on the Slack and maybe on the KubeCon EU. There will be a MetaCube booth and a lightning talk on the upcoming KubeCon. So feel free to visit, and I hope I will meet with some of you there. Yep, and that's all for today. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks, bye.